Hey everybody, welcome to Marriage Moment. I'm Jason, this is Renee. We are not marriage counselors, but we do these videos because we believe in marriage. We believe it should be the most important thing in your life if you're married. And we believe if you follow God's plan for it, it's going to be good, if not great. We also believe that marriage is, by God's design, one man, one woman, together for life, period, the end.
Yeah.
Not really a lot of room for exception in there, according to the scriptures. So what we have been doing for the last several weeks is going through these two books. I only have one of them here, but they are by the Feld hands, and they did some research and interviewed thousands and thousands of men and women, and then wrote these two books, one for men, one for women. And today we're going to look at the For Women Only book. And you, before we started filming, said, I hate it. I hate it.
This is a hard one.
This is your least favorite chapter of these books. And when these books first came out, it was your least favorite chapter. The new research really hasn't changed that for you. Still, you hate it.
I do.
So, ladies, pay attention. Men, this would be a good thing for you to pay attention to, too, because there's some things we can do to help our ladies. Okay? So, why do you hate this chapter so much?
So this chapter is called Keeper of the Photo Files. It's helping women understand, especially as a wife, the way our man's brain is designed, which is the way God designed it, and what he makes is all good.
Right.
That a man's brain is wired to be visual. And so that has a lot of applications when it comes to living in today's sex-saturated culture.
Wow. Yeah, for sure.
It's hard. And so I think I hate this chapter because of what it is saying, but it really does help a woman to understand how a man's brain is wired and why it makes it really difficult, and then what we can do to help our men.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing we can get to is what do we do? Because I think
Yeah.
on some level we all are aware of this, but just their research is so important and compelling and maybe hard to swallow, but should at least be talked about. We have to put it on the table.
Yeah, we do. It's important. And so the very beginning of the chapter, this was really interesting because I think this was something new that they added into this chapter from when we read it so many years ago. The newest research of brain activity and how different, we've said this so many times, how differently a man's brain is wired than a woman's.
It's really the whole point of these two books
Yeah.
is just pointing out the differences and helping you understand your spouse, that your differences are there on purpose. God made you that way, and you just have to lean into them and embrace them.
Yeah, and so this research that they've read and added into this part of the book is very interesting, and they're going to explain what it means that a man is visual. I think everybody understands that men are visually oriented. It's because of their brain, their specific brain wiring, the chemicals that are mixed, the brain structure of the man. It's just the way he was designed. And so it just means that when there is an attractive image, he has to look. I mean, it's going to talk about that a little bit, but it is like an eye magnet for a man.
That's the phrase they use is eye magnet.
Yeah, it's almost impossible not to look. And so this is going to talk in this chapter about a man's willpower and what they need to do once the image is there, what they can do. So we'll get into that in a minute. But the actual research was very interesting about a man's brain, that there's a portion of the back of a brain in a man and a woman called the nucleus accumbens. And it lights up in a man's brain whenever there is an attractive either person, an attractive woman in the room, or something on the TV, or just a picture. It doesn't have to be an actual live thing. So it lights up involuntarily. There's nothing a man can do about that part. Right. It is involuntary. So that's the wiring part, and that a man is visual. So there are two compulsions for a man that stems from this brain wiring. So we're going to talk about these two, and then we'll go on to the rest of that part of the chapter. So the first compulsion is that a man can't not notice.
Can't not notice. That word
Yeah.
notice is important. Can't not notice.
Yeah. And it was interesting on the numbers on the surveying. And we have to understand that they surveyed not just Jesus followers.
Right.
They were surveying every
people.
type of man. And so 98% of the men surveyed had to answer that they can't not notice. It's part of the way their brain is wired. So that's compulsion number one. And then compulsion number two for a man is they have a mental photo file of sensual images. So, and that's true for every man. That's not always true for a woman.
Right. They did say there are some women that have that ability, but like
Yeah.
98% of men, that's just the way we're wired.
Yeah. And it also means because of the wiring in the brain, these mental photo files pop up without warning. You don't want them there sometimes, and they just pop up. And it's just the way his brain is wired. And we can think of this for women as we have emotional pop-ups
Right.
all the time.
Right.
Men have
Visual.
pop-ups,
Yeah.
even when you don't want them. Same for women. Sometimes we don't want that.
Yeah.
So it's what we decide to do
That's it.
with these, and it's definitely for a man. So they also said in some of the surveys, one of the questions asked, when does this happen? And most of the men answered all the time.
Well, their research said that the men who said all of the time were younger men. Teenagers to 20 to 30-year-olds said all the time.
Yeah.
But the guys who are a little bit more seasoned and older said not all the time, but it's definitely
But
a
a lot.
temptation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So this is a temptation. The visual pictures in our sex-saturated culture creates this temptation to linger on these images and to enjoy consuming them.
So that's the word that I underlined several times in the
Yeah.
chapter was linger, because there's a difference between noticing and lingering. Noticing is unavoidable. Lingering is. I had a youth pastor who used to tell us, when you see a good-looking girl, if you just happen to notice her, that's the way it is. But if you take a second or third look, you've crossed the line. So that's lingering. You don't have to linger. That's a choice.
Yeah.
When the pop-up enters your brain, you choose whether or not you linger on it.
Yeah. So that was a really big part of this chapter is the man's decision on what he's going to do with knowing all this, that it's just part of his brain. So it gave 3 things for a man, and we've kind of touched on this, but that these sensual images and thoughts arrive involuntarily. The second one is that every man's involuntary physical impulse is to enjoy the feelings associated with these thoughts and images. That's involuntary. Kind of like, we don't think about breathing.
Mm-hmm.
We don't think about making our heart beat. It's involuntary that a man's wiring in his brain makes him want to just enjoy that image. And it causes powerful feelings. And we have to remember that God designed it this way.
Mm-hmm.
And he was thinking of the sexual part of the marriage. And that's why he designed
100%.
men this way. So the third thing is that every man can make a choice to dwell on the images and thoughts or to dismiss them. And this gets into that if you want to have a pure thought life and you want to honor the women in your life, your wife, your daughter, your mother, your grandmother. It was interesting that the men that answered this, that they are making the choice not to dwell on this and to have a pure thought life. The one thing that was interesting about all the ones that answered that were men who regularly attended church.
Right. And one of the statements that they said was men that desired a pure thought life kind of have a hold on this temptation.
Yeah.
Men that don't desire a pure thought life are controlled by this. And so that's really something the man watching these videos needs to think about is that a priority for you? Is having a pure thought life a priority for you? And if you're a Jesus follower, it needs to be.
Yeah.
And I love what you said, that if you want to honor the women in your life, specifically your wife, and if you have daughters, your daughters, you need to make having a pure thought life a priority.
Yeah.
To do what Paul said and capture every thought. When a thought pops up that you don't want in your brain, you just capture it, you put handcuffs on it, you throw it in jail. It's a choice to make.
Yeah. So I think just going back and reading this chapter again has helped me have so much compassion for you and for my son, to understand how hard this probably is in our kind of culture. And there are some things that she said in the chapter that are reassurances for a woman, because this is a lot to take in when you think about your man and the struggle, and just the thought of something popping up in your mind like this drives me crazy. I don't like it.
I hate it.
But when I understand that God designed it that way and that it has a purpose.
Yes.
And that you have a willpower to do whatever you have to do to keep your thought life pure.
Right.
And you do that for me. So some of the reassurances, this is really interesting, ladies, that she says he wishes he could reserve this visual nature just for his wife.
I think that's probably true for most men. Most married men would say that, especially those that are pursuing, a pure thought life, those that are Jesus followers. We wish that was the case.
Yeah. That's good for us to know that. That's very reassuring. And that a husband can see a beautiful woman and not even have a sexual temptation.
Yep.
That's good to know.
She talked about like walking through a museum.
Yeah.
And just appreciating beauty.
Appreciating the beauty. That you're just looking at how beautiful that is.
But not being sexually attracted to everything out there.
Yeah, that's good. And another reassurance is that every man is different and discipline makes a difference.
Well, another huge takeaway for me was that discipline, you cannot have a pure thought life without discipline. Discipline is one of the key parts of being a disciple. You can't be a disciple, a follower of Jesus, without being disciplined. And any man that I know, that I've personally talked to, we thrive on discipline. Sometimes it's hard, but good things come when you make hard decisions.
Yeah.
Long-term, good things come when you are disciplined.
Yeah, and so if this has been an issue for a man, I think it's never too late to
absolutely
do something about it. And I think God blesses you for being disciplined and helps you out, because I'm sure it's really hard. So another reassurance is that it's not because of me, like it's not because of the wife. Like a wife, when we read this chapter and read about this and understand this about our husband, we automatically go to that thought for us that, am I not attractive enough? Is that why he's feeling like he needs to look and appreciates a beautiful woman because I'm not that pretty? And I remember you and I, when we first read this book, we talked a little bit, and I think we had emailed too about it. And you spoke of that I was your standard of beauty. And we were just watching a show last night on the couch. And I was thinking about this chapter, and I mentioned something about the lady on the TV that was not dressed. She was not dressed modestly.
No.
And I said, what about that one? I was just asking a question just to see it. And you said, that does not turn me on at all, because I don't even like that.
That is not attractive to me.
Right. Yeah. And it's because I am your standard of beauty.
100%.
So that's really cool. That is very reassuring to a wife, especially to me. So it did mention the book that I think we've known about this book for a while. We haven't said anything about it, but Every Man's Battle. Every Man's Battle is a great book. It is more focused on pornography, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. But it touches on this whole visual Rolodex thing, that it's just part of the battle we face every day, and it gives some really good biblical principles on how to fight that battle well. Yeah. So you might check it out, Every Man's Battle. So this is another reassurance too, that this part of a man's brain and the way this works doesn't impact his feelings for his wife. It really doesn't. So that's very reassuring.
I agree with that, but I also disagree with that because the temptation does not impact our feelings for you at all. But I think the longer you choose to linger, the longer you choose to dwell on visual images that are not of your spouse, that's sooner or later going to impact the way you feel. You can't avoid that. That's why pornography is such a big deal. Because it does impact, it rewires your brain. And so I think that's a true statement for men who are trying to live a pure thought life. I think it's incomplete statement when it comes to men who are not worried about that.
Yeah, I could see that. So there's a little section at the end of this chapter that says, well, what can women do? Because women can help out. And with this understanding, we can really help out. One of the things we can do is to pray for our husband, because it's like it mentioned in the beginning of the chapter, it's like a minefield for a man walking out in today's culture and the things we see in movies and TV. I can remember a day when I'm old enough to remember that there wasn't much of that, in media. And, now we have these cell phones with private things that we can bring up.
Right.
So to pray for him and to pray for yourself, to check our heart as the wife, to go back to what we've talked about before in other chapters, that we believe the best about our husband. And when we know that this is happening, or we're in a room and you're somewhere where there is a very attractive woman and you know that your husband is struggling, to just believe the best, that he's trying really hard to keep his thought life pure. So, and then to become a support as a wife. And I think I was thinking about this for us. Back when we read this the first time, we really made an effort, because we emailed and talked about it, and I wanted to know what you liked about me in particular, sexually, just the visual part, and the things that you liked that I wore privately for you, not just out in the open, but things that you enjoyed just between us. And we've talked more about that in the last few years. And so that's how I can be supportive to you, is I dress for you sometimes in private because I know that you are visual. And you can enjoy that all you want. That's a good way to be supportive. And then as a wife, as a Jesus-following wife, that we need to champion modesty. And I think about that with my daughters, my granddaughters, women that are in my influence. I'm a teacher. So I need to be sure that I am being modest at all times. And that is something really important for us. And she mentioned a book that she has written. She's done a lot of more research, and she wrote for young women only. And I haven't read that one, but I want to get that one for my granddaughters as they grow up. So, and then I just wrote down that thing about men must have a standard of beauty that is their wife. It's almost a mindset that they have to change. Yeah,
100%. And I wanted to just real quick, then it's a long video. It's a lot of stuff. But I wanted to just kind of, from my own brain, this was written for women only, but there are some men watching, and there's some things we can do to help you ladies. And I just wanted to mention a few of them, and then we'll be done. So one of the things we have to do, men, is one of the things we're good at is we're protectors. That's in our nature. It's one of the ways our brains are wired, is to provide and to protect. And one of the best things you can do is to protect yourself, protect your marriage, and protect your family from pornography. We have been raised in a culture that says it's no big deal. Study after study after study has shown it is completely damaging to your brain. It is very damaging to all of your relationships with female people, especially your wife. You need to do whatever you have to do to protect yourself and your spouse and your family from pornography. Whatever that means for you, you need to do it. Like, be just militant about protecting your family because it is a dragon.
Yeah.
It is a beast, and you have to protect your family from it. Second thing I would say, and you've said it several times, but you need to reassure your wife that she's it. She is your standard, that there is nobody that can compete. You need to make sure she understands that and knows that from you. And then I wanted to say to the ladies, if we have this visual Rolodex, you could use that to your advantage.
Mm-hmm.
You could figure out a way to fill his Rolodex with images that are good for your marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So throw away the flannel pajamas, throw away the big giant robes, right?
Yes.
And you fill your man's visual Rolodex.
Yeah.
Seems like a great place to end.
Sure does.
Bye!
Bye.